Hello and welcome to another SDA Q&A. My very special guest today is Debbie Hooper. How are you, Debbie?
I'm good, thank you. Not well because I've got a cold, but that's okay. I'm good.
Well, I'm glad you're overriding that and joining us today. And I'm sure if you've got some water and lozenges there, you will be fine. I hope. If I see you collapse, we'll go to the Trump-Harris debate instead and commentate on that. Now, welcome everybody that's watching. Today we're going to be talking about two current affair issues going on within the Adventist Church, and we've entitled today's conversation, Today's Adventism, What Current Events Tell Us About the SDA Church. And we will be looking at two articles that Debbie wrote for Adventist Today, which is a fine news source for all things Adventist. I'll just bring it up onto the screen. There's an article that you wrote called I Will Go Ride. Is that on the screen there? I think so. And that we'll probably start with that one actually. And then the other article that you also did is this one. Sorry, I don't have a producer to press all the buttons. So it's just me. This one, Divided We Stand. Now, this one is heating up. This is the Conrad Vine kind of, would you say, controversy that's going on at the moment. So we will be chatting about those two articles that Debbie herself wrote for Adventist Today. And Lauren Seibel is the editor-in-chief of that magazine and does a great job. So tell us first up a little bit about your experience, perhaps writing for Adventist Today, how you got involved with that, how many articles you've written, and then we're going to get into today's topic.
I started writing for Adventist Today probably about 5, maybe 7 years ago now. I'd been a little bit active on the Adventist Today Facebook page because I loved. I was so excited about discovering it. It felt like home to me that I found my tribe where people were allowed to ask questions and really delve into topics that were generally not as well accepted in mainstream Adventism. So I guess probably Lauren is always on the prowl for people who might be able to put a couple of words together or string some sentences together. And perhaps, I don't really know. I haven't asked him, to be honest, but he contacted me and he said, would you like to do some writing for us? And I said, oh, I don't think you want me to do any writing for you because I have too many. I have more questions than I have answers. And he said, "Oh, so what do you mean?" And anyway, I went into a little bit more. I'd grown up as a pastor's kid and seen probably more than I wanted to. And what it did was sort of created a lot of turmoil and dissonance potentially. Anyway, so I explained this to him and I said, I don't know whether you could really call me a good Adventist, Lauren. And he said, you'll always be an Adventist. And it was like a breakthrough moment for me because I said, oh, really? Not really knowing what he meant. And he said, you are Adventism and Adventism is you. And I think what he meant by that, it was pretty open, but what I took it to mean anyway was that I was acceptable, and that there are other people like me out there. So it was really, really lovely. And then he said, what do you want to write about? So anyway, I gave him a list of topics and he goes, oh, you've got heaps to write about. Yeah.
Well, I think even recently, did he write an article or one of the journalists wrote about, does Adventist Today accept former Adventists to write articles? And it seemed to be, yeah, of course, sure. So whether you're fringe, former, have questions, are an Adventist, I think it does cover a broad spectrum of the Adventist mindset, and from what I can see, he certainly allows a broad scope there of topics.
Yeah. Well, I think, it's a broad church, even though it's not, a church that necessarily likes to think of itself in those terms. So,
Yeah, that's
like,
interesting.
it's almost like it's always trying to narrow down, narrow down, narrow down.
Yeah, it's funny
One
at a leadership level, they're trying to kind of harness and maintain the structure, the establishment, and then you've got people in it who are quite progressive and open-minded, and I think do truly grasp this notion of unity through diversity, and then you've got the other side that wants unity through uniformity. Um, so there's kind of three interesting little tribes there that
Yeah,
often
and I
play
think
off each other.
yeah, I think paradoxically, what happens when you try to force unification, that it actually causes greater rifts.
Yeah,
Like, you simply can't do that. It breaks
yeah,
eventually. It's like putting it under a vice, and we can see some of that happening now.
that's right. We're going to be talking about that exact topic in many ways, um, because sometimes the leadership strives for this idea of unity, and but they're very scripted and almost have a systemic kind of approach or a systematized approach to being Adventist and what we do, and it's step by step, and the Revelation seminars are scripted, uh, and then you've got the other kind of Adventist who's a bit more open and wants to talk about things. Um, we've got Brendan Paul Valiant has just said AT today wouldn't let conservatives write for them, just like Fulcrum wouldn't let liberals write for them. Yeah, I think there's a bell curve in there where um, I'm trying to work out whether it's called a magazine or a resource or um,
Publisher, probably.
a
Yeah,
publisher,
yeah.
where publishers get to um, choose if it's a little bit too out of their spectrum of their range of kind of what they want to present, and I think that's fine. I mean, I think with SDAQ&A, I'm pretty broad. I can't think of too many people I wouldn't interview or allow to have a voice, because the audience, people watching, get to talk about whether they agree or not with that. But some publishers, I think, need, have every right to go, no, I don't want to allow that on my platform. But I've found Adventists today very broad in their allowance of topics.
Yeah. I mean, I can see what Brendan's saying. You do automatically think of Fulcrum 7 when you think of right wing, and you think of Adventist Today and Spectrum as left wing. And that's the problem with bias, probably, is that, even although, like with journalism, you're trying very hard to remove bias in a story, and that's what I've been grappling with. That it still guides your curation of what you choose to write about, and then how you approach it and all of those things, and you constantly
Yes.
put in place checks to make sure that you're going, hang on a minute, like, check my own thinking on this.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
fair? Is that not? And perhaps there is a place, given that there's Fulcrum 7 and there's, Adventist Today, perhaps they balance each other a little bit. So maybe
Yeah.
that is okay, but I think there's definite benefit to there being, independent publishers, not just Adventist publishers, because
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, at the moment, you'd probably find the perspective that Fulcrum 7 would take on the Conrad Vine issue, which we will chat about today, um, is very supportive of him, and in some ways they're reflecting their tribe. We want to get this information out, whether
Mm.
you call that bias or not. It's their right; they can do that. Um, the church itself, so Fulcrum and Adventist Today, they're both independent publishers. Would you say that the Adventist Church itself, its mainstream, what's their equivalent publisher that there's two, isn't there? There's the Review and Herald, and what's the other one?
Um,
Not to put you on the spot
the
there.
record? The
And
record?
in Australia, we've got the Record. Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
In this part of the world, Australasia, so New Zealand, Pacific,
Mm.
and Australia, we've got the Record. So if we just looked at AT, the Record, and Fulcrum, I think you've got AT presenting perhaps a little bit more progressive liberal view, wanting to kind of shine some light and scrutinize some truth claims. You've got Fulcrum. This is what we believe, and we're pushing our agenda, which I don't think AT do. I think Lauren's got a balanced view there. He's not pushing an agenda. He's just asking questions.
Mm.
But then you've got the Record, which is very scripted. I've tried several times to get Record people on the program, and no, there's too much red tape we'd have to go through to be on there. So that kind of annoys me a bit. But I think the sign of a healthy church is it encouraging both the Fulcrum and the AT publishers to have a voice. I think that's
I
what's.
remember sorry, I was about to lean on here again. I think I probably caused sound issues, sorry.
That's all.
I was thinking back to your interview with Alexander Carpenter,
Yes.
and how he said that when the founders of Spectrum first set up, they were virtually given permission, or like given a blessing from the leadership, because to go independent, so that they could then talk about some of the issues that were not necessarily very widely spoken of in church. And when I think about the Record and the Review and Herald maybe slightly differently, and I'm not overly familiar with that, but I did work for the Record as a volunteer for a year. I think it reminds me of what I do as a content writer for a school, is that what I want to do is put the best face of the institution forward. Um,
Good
and
point.
yeah, I don't want to lie about the institution. I'm not saying that that is what happens. Certainly not when you've got any level of integrity. But it's more of a marketing exercise.
Yeah.
So you need independent publishers, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a good point. And Brendan reminded me it's Signs of the Times is the other one I was thinking
Oh,
of as
yes. Yeah, I've written
Review
for
and
them.
Herald, Signs of the Times. Yeah, and I think the balancing between all that, and even here with SDAQ&A, there's times where I think, well, this might not be a good time to have a particular program on, because there's already a bit of, so you do curate to some degree. I hope I
Yes.
don't curate very much, because the
Mhm,
whole point of what I'm trying to do is allow anyone connected to Adventism to have a say,
mhm,
or previously connected. But yeah, anyway, that we could talk a long time about all of
mhm,
that, because it's valid for people to be able to curate but it's also important to have voices out there that can raise issues and talk about things that are a bit taboo. And in my own personal humble opinion, the Adventist Church establishment, the leadership, tries way too much to control. They're almost like you're saying about putting the best foot forward. That's fine, but
mhm,
there's a controlling of the narrative that's separate again to that I find that the Adventist establishment tries to do. So it's not just putting on a rosy picture that's scripted and, hey, let's put our best foot forward. There's other things that they do because they have that power that tends to suppress or control or create the narrative that they want.
mhm,
Um, so yeah, there's some fine lines that people can
mhm,
cross or not cross. So
mhm.
we're going to talk about two articles that you um, wrote recently. We're going to come to the Conrad Vine one, which is probably the hottest topic within Adventism at the moment. We'll come to that second, and we're going to talk first about the I Will Go Ride. So yeah, today I'm talking with Debbie Hooper. She's a journalist, freelancer, writes a lot for Adventist Today, even recently wrote for Sydney Morning Herald. But today's topic is today's Adventism. What current events tell us about this SDA church? So we're not just looking at the content, we're commentating on it as well. So let's bring up I Will Go Ride. Tell us all about, sorry, just,
Sorry, that was me.
oh, was that? Okay.
I don't really know how to turn those notifications off.
I think I've got that on the screen there now. And by the way, those watching, thanks for your support recently. It's really helped me. I've now able to put our website up and hosted for 12 months. We're just about to get validated or accredited on Twitter and going back live there every week. And also we have the new one. Oh yes, I've set up StreamYard so I can be promoting access for people that present the gospel message every week. They can just go and do it without me having to press all the buttons. So I'm going to train them up to do that. So thanks everyone for your donations. I really appreciate it. Also, just a quick plug, tomorrow at this time, Steve Daly is back and on the program. And this week on the same time, but the day after, we've got Clinton Baldwin doing our gospel presentation, SDA&A Church. Okay, back to the topic at hand. Tell us all about I Will Go Ride.
Yes, I was just trying to work out how to shut my messages up. Sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, where are we? I'm trying to find my.
Because you've got it. The subtitle is Aussie Riders Distribute the Great Controversy
Yeah,
of
so this is
700-mile ride.
yeah. There are a number of reasons I really was drawn to this particular story. Excuse me, I've got a cough drop in my mouth. My son is a cyclist, so I was really interested to see because they went 1,145 kilometers from Brisbane to Eugowra.
Wow.
It was a massive ride, and if you have a look at, where are we here? This particular slide, you'll see that there's quite a lot of elevation involved in that. So I was fascinated, first of all, by that, but also by the fact that their main goal was to
Sorry, I'm
just.
just sorry to interrupt. I've just realized I've got to stop screen sharing so that we can see your slides. So
Oh,
just give me 1 minute. I think there we go.
okay.
So now that's over to you. You're in control of the slideshow.
Oh, okay. All right. So as you can see here, they rode over 1,145 kilometers, which I think is over 700 miles from Brisbane to Eugowra. And I'll just quickly show you the elevation here. You can see that they covered quite a lot of mountainous roads. And if you know anything about the east coast of Australia, you'll know that the Great Dividing Range goes down that section. And Eugowra is actually on the other side, on the western side of the Blue Mountains near Sydney. So they did a pretty massive trek, and I thought that was pretty impressive. And what they were wanting to do on that trip is to actually distribute 1,500 books while they were there, while they were on the road. Obviously, the Great Controversy was one of those, or not obviously, but it was one of those. And Your Bible and You was another one. They also had a small brochure that they wanted to hand out. And they were saying that their ride was inspired by a literature evangelist from the 1800s called Philip Reiki, who actually rode his bicycle in the back roads of New South Wales to sell books, especially The Great Controversy, to people in remote places like on farmland, etc. And that's where this comes in. So you can see here that there was a homecoming associated with this ride. They were doing the ride in 7 days so that they could get to the Eugowra Church homecoming weekend that was celebrating 120 years. Because what happened back with Philip Reiki is that in the 1890s, he was pedaling through the back areas of the behind the Blue Mountains and came across a farmer who was there with his 11 children, and those 11 children had recently become motherless. So the man's name was Thomas Kent, and his wife had died very, very recently, and so he had only recently moved to the farm where he wanted to raise them, but his wife had said to him, look, you know that I am a woman of faith. I want to see you in heaven, and I want our 11 children to be in heaven. So this sort of setting is what Philip Reiki walked into when he grabbed the Great Controversy out of the pannier of his bicycle and introduced Thomas Kent to the Great Controversy. Well, to cut a long story short, he then went to Sydney after he'd read The Great Controversy, where he heard some sermons by none other than Ellen White.
Wow.
And he became a baptized member of the Adventist Church.
This was Kent, did you say?
Yeah. Thomas Kent. So,
wow.
So when he went back to Yagara, he spoke to the neighbours, the neighbouring families, and they were convinced as well, and they were the ones who set up this little church. You can see this cute little church here. And in the 120 years since then, that little church and Philip Reiki's sale of the Great Controversy to Thomas Kent resulted in what is estimated to be more than 100 denominational workers with Seventh-day Adventist Church. 17 of those are ministers, and there's a sort of a conservative estimate that 20,000 people's lives have been impacted. So that was quite a nice little story that went along with it, but it was quite a convoluted story. So I was just curious about how all of this came together and how they were going to distribute 1,500 books on this 1,145 kilometre ride when they had to cover an average of 160 kilometres every day. I don't know if you know about riding, but when you're going over elevation and if you have a wind coming at you from the side, it can make a massive difference to how long you're on the ride. And so I did ask some questions about this, and I eventually was able to get some answers, which was really great. And I was told that they'd had these books in their support vehicles, and then whenever they saw someone, and the front riders of the peloton of 7 riders saw someone and they gave a little wave, if they felt that the person was friendly enough, then the back riders would stay back and start a conversation. And as you can see here, like this lady here looks like she's in the middle of the street, and they've somehow just pulled her up. And they're like, what are all these guys? What are, these
going on?
in there? Yeah, because obviously in their we call them mammal suits, like middle-aged men in lycra.
Oh, I hadn't heard that before.
Oh, okay. Which is quite an odd sight, I'm assuming, out in rural New South Wales. So obviously these people are like, yeah, why are you here? And anyway, so that gave them the opportunity to talk about the reason and the story of Philip Reiki and Thomas Kent. And then that this is the book, The Great Controversy. Yeah. So they gave them a book. And yeah, so anyway, I was just interested in that whole thing because Missionary Book of the Year, The Great Controversy, when there's so much, pardon the pun, but controversy surrounding the Great Controversy at the moment, was just something that really sparked my interest. First of all, how do you find that many people out on those back roads? Because you don't, like, if most Australians would know that on those back roads there are a few people and they're very far between. And so I wanted to know how, like, this was the promise of that ride, how many did you actually hand to them? And
Mm,
then, when you're riding, when you're in the saddle for 5 to 7 hours a day,
mm,
how much time can you afford to take to start those conversations, to hand over a book? And then is the book something that they're going to actually appreciate for what it is? Because back in Thomas Reiki and Thomas Kent and Philip Reiki's time, the Great Controversy was written at a similar time and in a similar phase in history, and many of the same kinds of things were happening
mm.
at that
So it was a
time.
bit more relevant
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that time period. Is it
yeah,
still relevant now, I guess you're saying? Yeah.
yeah. Well, that was kind of my question. So, anyway,
Sorry
go on.
to jump in, and you're probably gonna cover this, but sometimes you've said and you were able to chat to people. Are you
Mm,
talking about the actual? Because some actual Kents were on the ride.
yeah, yes,
I think was the, Glen Townend sorry, not,
yeah, he was.
Glen
So,
Townend was on the ride too. He's
yeah,
not a Kent, but,
no,
Glen Townend was on the
mm,
ride, and he's the president of the SPD, so it was quite an auspicious event.
yeah.
But were the Kents on the ride as well, and did you get a chance to talk to people like Glen as also?
Well, Glenn Townend and his brother, name escapes me, the Queensland
Is it
president,
Brett?
Brett,
Yeah.
were on the ride, and so I thought, well, let's start at home, and I sent some questions to Brett, but I didn't hear back from Brett. But I knew that there was a rider there who was a Kent. Well, like obviously the Townends and the Kents aren't related, but there were it was at least one Kent relative, and his name, Rob Hansford, who is an old friend of mine. Thanks, Rob. And he was willing to have a chat with me about it. He'd had a talk with the other guys, and they were willing for me to ask some questions. So that was really
Oh,
nice of them.
so
Um,
he's connected to the Kent family.
yeah, so
Right.
he's a relative, a descendant, and he was at the homecoming in Ugara that was at the end of the 7-day ride. Did
Mm,
I even explain that? I don't know. There have been more than one of these. There's actually been about 5, and the last big one was before the 2022 General Conference session,
right.
and they rode a lot further. So they rode from Washington, D.C. to Missouri. I can't think of the name, but wherever they do this General Conference session, and they're actually met by Ted Wilson at the end.
Right. And they were
Yeah.
giving away Great Controversy again, the book.
Yeah, so they're doing the same thing, and they were
Yeah.
handing these out as
And
they
it
go.
is a great story. It's a great PR
Yeah,
story, and it's
yeah,
the main book of Adventism. Great Controversy is kind of the main book, and then you can trace this source event where the evangelist Riki comes along, and he hands the book to the Thomas Kent, and from that Kent goes to Sydney, hears Ellen G. White herself speaking, comes back, converts half the farmers in his area, and a whole dynasty, as they say in
mm,
America, begins. And what a great what do you call origin story?
yes,
Whether you agree with the Great Controversy's content or not, for a PR person to go, hey, would have been a PR person's dream to write about this and promote this.
yeah, exactly.
So
Gillian just said it was St. Louis,
that's
Missouri.
right.
Thank you, Gillian.
That's right. And that was a big ride, and Ted met them at the end. Do you think Ted Wilson knew about this particular I Will Go ride event? Is there any research you've done to find out his any
Mm,
comments on it?
no, I
Because
wasn't
Glenn
able
would know him personally, and so would Brett.
mm, mm. Yeah, I wasn't able to establish that. Actually, on that ride, though, on the 2022 ride, there were a number of other people like Michael Worker, and several other big names who actually did that ride as well. So
Mm,
they were GC. Oh, sorry. Some of them worked at the GC. But they all seemed to, or most of them, had a relationship back to Aussie
mm.
Kents or that era of people. The
I think
Townends. there in that one too. But
And
on
are the
this
Townends and the Kents related at all? Is there some sorry, I'm getting sidetracked, but is there some
mm,
connection,
I can't
intermarrying at all there with
I
them? Not
can't
sure.
answer that, but I do know that they are two very big Adventist families in, well-known Adventist families.
Yeah, because Gary Kent, is involved he was involved with It Is Written, but now has his own independent one. What's it called? The Journey or something? Oh, I've just got a mental blank.
Gary Kent, yes.
Gary has. I've just got a mental blank. I know it
Citroen
very
you're
well.
referring to?
What's that?
The yellow Citroen, is that what you're referring to?
No, no, he's literally a kilometre down the road from me is their home base. The Journey the Journey's I
Oh,
can't
yeah,
remember. Anyway, the point is he is a descendant of Thomas. Other names spring to mind, Grenville Kent.
mhm.
He's I guess a younger des descendant of Thomas. So how many generations back would Thomas say, for example, to Grenville be?
Oh, goodness. Are you seriously
That
asking me that?
is that 5? I don't know.
Um,
I'm guessing 5.
1895 was the children of Thomas Kent. Um, so, oh goodness,
Well,
I'm
Thomas
terrible.
would probably be his great-great-grandfather. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked. That my fault, but it's fascinating history, and they've had a
Yeah.
fascinating impact. There's some connection also with my grandfather, who sadly passed away when my mother was only 2.5. And if she's watching, she can fill me in again. There's some connection with him coming into the church via the Kents, or somehow helping. I can't remember the details, but he was Fergus MacFarlane, and he would travel around and was a evangelist for the Adventist Church, but sadly was killed by a train accident when Mum was only 2. But so he's
Yeah.
someone I would have loved to have been able to chat to about all of this.
Yeah.
But back to the ride, you were mentioning this Kent relative, Hannaford, did you say?
Hansford.
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 Did
Yeah.
he was he able to relay any other information to you and then get
Yeah.
back to your stats there?
Mm. So, and just let me, just clarify that Brett and Glenn Townend only rode for part of the last ride, but I believe they did the full ride in the United States. So
That's right.
the
A
Ugara was only partially what they did.
And Kay Judge has just reminded me the incredible journey. Thank you, Kay. I
Oh,
appreciate that.
yes.
It's
Oh,
literally a kilometre down the road from here, and I think
yeah,
they do a great job. Great,
on that
great
note,
program.
Gary Kent next year is circumnavigating Australia in a yellow Citroen,
Oh, that's where that
and
reference
that
was.
yes, and that is, of the same vintage or a mock-up, perhaps a one that's been fixed up or whatever they call it.
Right.
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah.
here's an interesting thing. Kay Judge has just written that she is
Mm.
a 5th generation Seventh-day Adventist, and her great-grandmother, my great-grandmother was Thomas Kent's wife, I'm guessing. My grandmother was
Yeah.
Mary Kent, eldest daughter of Thomas.
Oh,
There, I
yes,
did not
yes.
know that, Kay. There we go.
Wow, that's
That's a deep
fascinating.
connection there to, the
Yeah.
Kent family.
Yeah, well, okay, so just quickly then, Gary Kent next year is going to, as I said, circumnavigate Australia, and that is once again is paying homage to the early literature evangelists, and he will be handing out the Great Controversy as well. And I believe that there is going to be some big tent evangelism things that are
Right.
coming. Gillian might know a little bit
Know a
more
bit
about
more. Yeah.
that. Yeah, but speaking to Rob, he was very generous in giving me an understanding of how many great controversies that they did hand out. And so they ended up handing out, it was all approximate. It wasn't statistical, it wasn't recorded anywhere. It was just based on what they remembered. They were able to hand out about half of their load that was in the support vehicles, which was probably more than I would have thought that they'd be able
Mm.
to hand out. And
How
what they
how
did,
many were there again in the full,
1,500.
1,500? So they gave about half of that. Okay.
Yeah, so he thought maybe up to 800
Yeah.
copies. and they handed them out. I showed that some pictures of where they handed them out, but they also actually ended up going into towns where they were able to leave them in little shops and, cafes, and to actually spend some time in the town square kind of thing. And
Yes, yeah,
there's
okay.
lots of people who were just drawn by all of these mammals.
The men in was it middle-aged mammals in
Yeah,
lycra?
men in lycra. um,
Yeah, I've never
and
worn lycra. Thank
I
goodness.
shouldn't. It's a bit disrespectful, but I don't mean that. Like, they're
No,
actually
no,
these
it's not your term, you haven't come up with it, it's just kind
no,
of
no,
a term
no,
that people have labeled.
no.
Um,
These
yeah,
guys were probably the least mammally of all the
and
mammals because
and and look, I can just imagine Brett and Glenn having a good laugh at that anyway. They
I
they
hope
wouldn't they
so.
wouldn't be offended by that. Yeah.
And and they're pretty fit dudes, because you can't do
Oh,
160 kilometers day after day for 7 days in a row
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
on those kinds of roads.
No
So
way. Like, they're fully following the Adventist health message. Whenever Glenn or Brett, if I see them online somewhere, I think, like, I think I was at college with Glenn and he looks half my age. So, there you go. Kay has just added that, so her grandmother was Mary Kent, the eldest daughter of Thomas, and Mary married William Taylor, and they brought many, many, many people into the Adventist church in the South Island. And so on my father's side, there's a lot of South Island connection. And my mother's side is the Fergus McFarlane I mentioned earlier. And he
yes.
was from, um, he her side of the family come from Hayden and near Toowoomba. What was the town that they went to again?
Ugara.
Eugowra. I wonder how far that is from Toowoomba.
Well, these guys went through Toowoomba, if I
Mm,
remember
yeah, I
rightly.
can see on the map there. Yeah,
Mm. So they went through Toowoomba and then all down the back, um, yeah, of the
yeah.
range. So yeah, it was
Sorry,
pretty.
back to you. I keep getting sidetracked in all
That's
the
right.
interesting comments.
I'm trying to remember where I'm up to. Okay, so
Well,
how
you were
many?
talking to Rob, and you about 800 books, you reckon?
So Rob, and he'd had a conversation with all of the guys apparently, and they agreed that about 800 had been handed out. Now, what they also did was they met with some of the churches along the way, and there aren't that many churches. There are only, there's Dubbo and there's a little one near Dubbo. Sorry, I've got my notes here, but I can't quite remember. And then there was another little one. So there were about 3 churches, and with Dubbo and the church, I lived at Dubbo for a year, and I can't even remember the name of the other one. Anyway, of an evening, a couple of the evenings, they met with church folk in along the way, and so they were able to leave some books with them. They also left some books at the homecoming with the people at the homecoming. I don't know whether those were more mementos of the trip, probably, because it's quite a meaningful thing, I guess, to give people who are coming home to Ugara a copy of The Great Controversy, I'd imagine. And then apparently a literature evangelist at the very end was asked if he could have the remaining ones.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's kind of where they all ended up, which was interesting. And that's what I was mostly interested in. So what actually happened to those books? And being a ride about modern evangelism, where they wanted to show people that they can witness effectively in day-to-day interactions. That was sort of the goal of this. And also to feed into the general conference, the Great Controversy Project 2.0, which is to distribute 1 billion of the Great Controversy.
So this is part of that initiative,
Yeah, well, it's not official.
right?
although it's interesting, it's a little bit unclear because there were official logos used. There were, there were promotional videos that went out on various platforms that were a little bit more official. So this was actually fully funded by these writers. So it was totally something that they initiated, and they just wanted to show people this is what you can do. This is how you can meet people. This is how you can influence people and share the Adventist message.
Mm.
So yeah, and I thought it was actually a really it had a lovely story behind it that I think is very appealing to people. That it also was something that people. Oh, I'm losing my train of thought now.
Well, it was
But
a
my
positive.
question, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say you're observing that it's a positive uh,
Yeah.
story, and this is the interesting thing. Like I'm of two minds. I see what a great story, the
Mm,
history, the family connection,
mm,
influencing people with this book. Um, but but then I go, well, is that the best book to be to
mm.
be giving out? I don't even think it fairly represents the current, you know,
So that was the
Adventist.
question, like, how effective is that going to be, and how would they even
Yeah,
know how effective that is going to be? Because,
yeah,
obviously, in I don't know whether you know about this, but in other parts of the world, to do with this project, the Great Controversy Project, the church has actually got some pretty poor press.
yes,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Because they've been wheeling out this kind of distribution for many years. This is not like when Ted Wilson said we're
yeah,
going to give out 1 billion great controversies. I remember thinking, well, I remember 10 years ago a similar one was done. There's this initiative to give away free great controversy books has been going on for decades, um, and this is just the latest wave of it.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there's
I,
the money involved in that, and I found it quite interesting doing a bit of research on how it's been received in the past, and there was a very interesting story that came up about Portland and how this independent publisher had been called Remnant Publications,
yes, that's
had
right.
had been, like, trying to attract donations from people, and they actually were able to, it says on this slide
Yeah,
here.
you might need to read it out for us. It's a bit small.
Okay. So what happened was these guys ended up mailing out a whole heap without much context or anything. This part says, but the unsolicited gifts have annoyed many Portlanders who have taken to social media to decry the waste of paper and postage. Portland is only Remnant's latest target. A web page on its website solicits donations to the Great Controversy Project, which helps Remnant Publications do mass distributions of the Great Controversy in major cities and even whole states across America. It raised $8 million in 2020 and paid a total of $140,000 in income to the three men who run it, according to the latest public filing with the Internal Revenue Service. So that was
That's
um,
fascinating.
mm,
It's interesting. I remember the band U2 in the early days of iTunes. They released an album and gave a free album into everybody who had an iTunes account. The initiative was a team effort between iTunes and U2, and it caused so much backlash. Like, here's
mm,
one of the most famous bands in the world saying, "Here's a free album, guys." People do not like unsolicited
mm,
material. And I pondered that a lot about this particular topic we're talking about today, that they essentially giving out unsolicited
mm,
material. And I think they don't really care about backlash, because even if there's five people from the
mm,
1,500 that eventually are wheeled out, or the 1 billion, even if there's a small percentage, it's like the sales funnels where, they'll sweep the internet and gradually get the big funnel and gradually down, and
mm,
and they only get like 1% of a thousand, but that don't care, because they've got that person's in now, and there's a lifetime of Adventism and tithes and offerings, and but they seem oblivious to the negative feedback, like they just
They got a
keep,
lot of negative press.
yeah, keep telling us some more about. There's another one there I see.
Well, down here, what people did was they went on Remnant Publishing website where they were asking for donations, and Remnant Publishing said, help somebody to have a better way of life. And the Willamette Week, which is this Portland's News Weekly paper, says, better in what way, though? What succor can Portlanders, troubled by random dog attacks and squatters' den fires, hope to take from the great controversy written by Ellen G. White? The book purports to be a consideration of the growing influence of the Catholic Church on American life, a spicy topic in 1858, before pivoting to White's contention that the most violent divide among Christians will soon be whether the Sabbath falls on Saturday or Sunday.
Wow, good point. We're getting to the heart of it now.
And then I was reading some other responses that they also published. So this is from Jones Clayton, sorry. Imagine if they'd taken the money spent on publishing and mailing this to feed the hungry, provide shelter to the unsheltered, and offer aid to sick people. I read about a guy in ancient times who did stuff like that. Can't recall his name. I think it was Jesse or something like that. pretty insightful. Daniel Brown said, I found the pages of the book ignited quickly and burned cleanly with little ash in my chimney charcoal starter, a quality publication.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I guess what you raised before I finish on that is, even if there were only 5 people, but they don't know if there's only
They
5.
don't even have a follow-up with that, do they? And yet the foundational start of the story is one man converted one person with the one book. 20,000 people were positively affected by it. So they're
Yeah.
good at the reverse engineering of the statistics, but it's like a campaign. Like when you mentioned earlier, you work for a school and you help with their marketing and PR, and you're putting the best foot forward. I bet you have follow-up stats and studies to go, did that campaign work? Was it effective? To me, this is just the splatter bomb, exactly like the pyramid marketers used, to be honest. Where they just splatter bomb and they hope that one person comes in. They seem oblivious to the negative feedback. If you were getting that kind of negative feedback for your particular work with the school, you'd change your campaign tactic.
You would
So
hope so.
it's quite telling.
With all the information or the ability to gather information out there, Salesforce have, tracking methods where, okay, you have to be careful not to get private information, but if you've handed out a certain number of the great controversy in a particular town, you would want to let that church know, hang on, we've done a little bit of seeding here, please go back and double check on those particular people. But the stewardship is what's missing. And while I find the story really beautiful in the way those 7 guys who rode that far showed such commitment, I found the actual story of that really beautiful. I was concerned for them that their efforts were not going to come to anything because the context of the great controversy in today's era is very, very different, as we can see from here. And while I don't think those guys would have attracted the same criticism because, our writers, they wouldn't have attracted the same criticism at all because, this was a personal interaction, a face-to-face interaction. And if anything, that would be the best possible circumstances by which someone would be introduced to the great controversy. I still am concerned, and the only way that the church can find out about whether this is something that is relevant to today's society, to the unchurched, which is most of today's society, is to actually start gathering some data, and they're not willing to do that. And I think that that's a worry, to be honest.
It's because it's not even their focus. What they're aiming for is the one Thomas Kent to go, oh, this is good. and have a big impact.
Mm.
They're not. I doubt that there's ever any intention to have any follow up with how many people got it, what was the response.
Mm.
It's just the back end. It's just the start of the story. This is really great, passionate guys, fit guys, good representatives of the Adventist Church, but they're following a tried and tested. Put out this book.
Mm.
One person out of that 1,500 might become an Adventist. Done. Soul
Yeah.
won to heaven.
So is that the way that they'll keep going, or are they gonna actually start getting
I
serious about it?
they will never change. These are questions that I was chatting about as a late teen, early 20s with my friends, talking about are they going to update their Revelation seminars? Are they going to do that? And I went to one last year just out of interest. They had that big floaty the statue,
Oh,
was it
yeah, yeah,
Babylon thing or
yeah,
whatever? They'd spent,
the
I think,
golden statue.
$15,000 on that
Mm.
statue, and I thought, oh, I'm just going to go in. So I literally pulled over. Perfect timing. It was about to start, and I imagine it was going back in time to 1958. Slightly different jargon, but scripted, exact same topics. And I'm thinking, this is 44 years after my conversations with my friends, excited that it's probably going to change. People like Glenn Townend were my age group, like, yeah, let's revolutionize the church. Let's bring about change. Let's bring about positive um, aspects and put them to the fore and talk about social issues and ensure that women are no longer suppressed with the women's ordination. We're exactly where we are. We're exactly now where we were 40 years ago with
Mm.
no sign. Just got the great stories, got the sales funnel going.
Mhm.
That's a hard one because you don't want to criticize people who are putting out compelling information, are
Yeah,
passionate about what they're doing.
yeah.
They're good people. Um, we're just saying, is that the best use of your content? And I think the answer is yes. That's my conclusion, that this is the
Mm.
best way to get Adventism out there, because you need a certain type of person to come into the church to somehow keep it going. And
Yeah.
if you just get the numbers in because you put on a really modernized um, outreach kind of program,
Mm.
people are going to come in and go, whoa, hang on, that's not what I signed up for. So if they're going to
Mhm.
be true to what at the core Adventist doctrines are, the thrust of Adventism,
Yeah.
it is the best thing. They're good on you, Glenn and Brett. This is the way to go. Keep doing it.
There is actually another version of, the Great Controversy that was Gillian, can you help me? Um,
I remember this one. It was aimed at kind of the youth. Was it
yeah.
called The Cosmic Conflict?
Yes, Cosmic Conflict, and I can't remember the
Yeah,
author's
let's appeal
name
to the youth. Let's
now.
take a few things out,
Yeah.
condense it a bit, and
It was interesting when I was talking to Rob that he said they decided not to go with the Cosmic Conflict because it looked too cartoony.
right, right. Yeah, interesting. And look, the thing is, they're offering my generation, I'm sure generations before that, your Bob Wolfgrams, Lowell Tarlings, these guys,
Mm,
Genelevich, Russell Schultz, all these guys, we're trying new things to present Adventism in new ways, and every new generation that comes through, I'm sure you were told as well, like, yeah, be involved, get this stuff going. This is going to be great. We're going to modernize, and
yeah,
even people today, young people today, are like, oh yeah, this is changing. Look, we're getting to have this. We're getting involved. We're a part of it. At the end of the day, you're going to wake up one day and go, oh, hang on, it hasn't changed. We're
mm,
just part of a sales funnel, and it looks nice on the edges, but as it goes down, it's Ellen White, great controversy. Bing, you hit your mid-40s, you got kids in the school, you're stuck. There we go. Got a
mm,
job. Let's
mm,
not worry about it.
mm.
So this false hope thing was probably the thing I've felt most of a pushback on. I don't appreciate that I was offered this false hope that things are changing, while all the while worrying about the time of trouble and the Sunday law coming in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think,
Kay Judge writes, I think there are many other initiatives for outreach within the Adventist Church. The great controversy was a Ted Wilson initiative. I'm sure you're right, Kay. but none of them have stuck. None of them have worked. The only one that keeps going and is promoted by the actual SDA church officially is this kind of initiative. And like you said, Debbie, they did it off their own bat, paid for out of their own pockets, but it's still branded as an SDA initiative.
I think too that the Great Controversy was voted Missionary Book of the Year by church leaders.
Yeah.
Is
So
interesting. It shows a lack of not being in touch, which is a shame.
Yeah. And Kay, I'd love you to share what initiatives you're referring to as well.
I wonder if Kay is referring to the health initiatives and, so much more that is like I see the local church here to flood relief.
That's
Those
good stuff.
things,
ADRA, yeah.
those, that's getting back to what that guy was criticizing when he received his copy unsolicited in the mail. Imagine if you put money into helping the sick
Yes, yeah.
and needy and
Yeah. And Kay has just clarified she's referring to medical work, education, ADRA. I agree, Kay. Good on you. And thanks for pointing that out. And like Debbie just said, that the person who complained about it, what if they'd put all of that money, even this recent trip of the 7 riders, imagine what that would have cost with the 1,500 books. Imagine just putting
they
that into a local ADRA thing instead,
Yeah, they raised donations for that, but interestingly enough, on the GC website, where you download the proposal for, your church raising the money to go and go to a publisher and purchase the books, the Great Controversy, to distribute, have free downloads. They've got free downloads in different languages, but that's not the way it's marketed. It has to be, like they're spending money. Is it a waste of money is my question. Is it a misuse? How many of those books are ending up lost in or forgotten in back rooms or, somebody's car boot or,
I guarantee that anyone who watches this over the next few days, will be 1,000 people have watched this program. I bet of that 1,000 people, only 5 have actually read The Great Controversy right through. So let alone people that are just off the street, they've got a book in their face. Very unlikely that they'll even read the book. But again, the point isn't for them. The clever marketing is one person might. One person might come into the church, and that one person then is contributing potentially the right mindset. They've come in via the Great Controversy. They'll commit to a lifetime of tithes and offerings, and they might even have the same influence that Thomas did and bring in a lot more locals as well. Well, it's an interesting topic. Sir Nilo writes, a Great Country graphic novel would be great. Does it exist? And I think there is one. Is that the one you were referring to? Because that's different to the Cosmic Conflict. I do know.
I don't know, Peter, because
I've got an idea that Grenville Kent was involved with something like a graphic novel on those topics. Maybe if Grenville's watching, he can share with us that information.
But the criticism of the Cosmic Conflict one was that the cover just looked unrealistic and
Right.
yeah.
CMB, hey Colin, good to have you here. The ambassador, he writes, SDAism thrives on future faking to keep the wheels turning. It'll never change. That's why I left. I just realized this isn't going to change. And I don't mind people staying. Like Kay, I just now realized she's like 5th or 6th generation Adventist, 5th generation Adventist, and loves it. And she's pointing out great things, like she's just pointing out prison ministries, mental health stuff, smoking. There's all sorts of great things. So I don't want to come across as criticizing, but I think what I'm trying to do is normalize for people to go, well, that's just not for me. I doubt that many people 30 plus would look at Adventism and go, oh yeah, that's for me. I'm going to go for that. It mainly has people in it because of these generational occurrences. The Adventism grows because of the Thomas Kents. One person influenced brings in families, and that's how Adventism grows. It grows more from schools influencing kids when they're young,
Mm.
and through family. It's not really an ideology that people go, oh yes, that's something I could buy into. You know,
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? The next story is actually seems to I don't know how to quite say this, but it seems to buy into conspiracy style thinkers, though, that I do wonder whether there is a level of that would be appealing. That, however, if somebody who isn't that way inclined in thinking, and I'm not trying to be critical of them, but is someone who wants to do a little bit of research, they only have to look just online very, very shallowly to discover that there's a lot of questions around Ellen White's
mm,
authorship and, you
oh
know, her even her character.
yeah.
So I just wonder, are they doing the church any favors, is my question. Could there be a better publication that is gonna be more helpful to more people?
I know you're not asking me, it's a
Yeah,
rhetorical
it
question.
is,
But
it
if
is.
you were asking me, I would say it is the best way because they
Yeah,
know what their source material is, and they know if they pretty it up and bring people in, people are gonna go, "That's not what you sold me." So,
mm,
to bring people in through the great
yeah,
controversy, it funnels them in to go, "Oh, yeah, this is what I expected," and that one person is a bit of a goldmine.
yeah, interesting.
Your generation, my generation, I'm a bit older than you, but we all had this great idea. I spent my life trying to vamp up Adventism, focusing on Jesus, great music, worship programs. Graham Thornfelder changed the landscape of North New South Wales by initiating creative events and weekend retreats. And it was an exciting 30 years
Yeah,
um, of a complete dedication to revamping this notion of promoting Adventism to a broader community. Boom, squashed, gone. Don't have coffee at camp.
mm,
I'm I'm making it small there. And Kay writes, many Adventists would disagree. And that's good. I like that
mm.
people can speak and disagree. And that's why, Kay, I want you on the program to come and disagree with me. Now, Kay has
It's
also
worth
said, have
looking at.
you read The Great Controversy, Peter? I can tell you, Kay, since January, I've just started the sixth time reading it. Not counting just reading it from start to finish, but also isolating certain chapters, chapter 25, chapter 30, chapter 39, chapter 40. I've read them over and over again, even more. And so, this may not be what all Adventists say is my Adventism, but it certainly captures the general thrust of Adventism. And I would challenge anyone to read The Great Controversy and come away saying, yeah, I believe that. Okay, do you believe The Great Controversy? Is The Great Controversy book something that you would recommend to people as a really good book to explain what Adventism is? I doubt you would. That's all I'm saying. So if you come into Adventism by a great controversy, you'll land into the church and you won't actually feel like it's too different. But if you're sold the kind of Adventism that is more focused on Jesus, the gospel, Ellen White way in the back seat, and you come into the Adventist church, you'll find certain churches that don't overpreach that, but you're going to guarantee find 70 to 80% of churches that do. It's a minefield.
Mm,
The great controversy is like this little time bomb within the church that just keeps going off. And Kay, it affects people's lives. So many Adventists would disagree with me, but what do you do with those 70% of the churches that agree with the great controversy and the very leader of the worldwide church promoting it, the Australian leader promoting this book?
mm.
Like, Kay, would you suggest that they maybe be better to spend their money elsewhere? Would you agree with me on that? I know you disagree on a lot of things that I say, but would you agree with that? Let me know in the thoughts. And that's the point. We get to have these disagreements. I like that. Um, Angela Lima writes, um, You couldn't pay me enough to read that book. I'm reading it for research, Angela. Okay, now,
Angela, I think, also asked if I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. And I
right.
just thought I'd say, Angela, I do have my name on the book still. Yes, I do. So I know that some people would say that my beliefs probably aren't very compatible with Adventism, but I'm not really ready to go away yet. I'm very connected and also very interested in the people who are in the church, and they're people that I love a lot. So yeah.
And with the like, you're writing a fair bit for Lauren's. I'm not saying his, but he's the current
Name.
chief editor. Is that the right term? Chief editor,
Executive.
executive editor. I'm
Yeah.
so bad with all the jargon, having not been in the workforce for so long. He really shines some amazing spotlights on key topics,
Mhm.
and I love that he's doing that and that you're writing for that. So if people stay in the church or don't stay in the church, being involved with that kind of stimulating topic, I think is fantastic.
Mm.
Now, have you got some more things to say on the go ride? Because I've got a great segue into the next topic. Queen Esther writes, there is so much confusion and controversy in Adventism. Look at what's going on with Dr. Conrad Vine at the moment. Things will never change. I'm glad I'm out of it. And that's a really I'm glad I'm out too. And it's a hard thing but I'm glad Kay Judge is in. Like I'm not criticizing the good thing the Adventist Church does, or I'm just saying, let's ask questions, let's scrutinize. And if a church doesn't want to answer the hard questions or suppresses any kind of conversation, that's an indication of an unhealthy church. So I would love Brett or Glenn to come on the program and talk about it. I'm not going to criticize them. I'd even say, yeah, good on you. You did a great thing there, but maybe ask some questions like, what's the follow up? Do you see this as an ideal plan? The questions you raised in your article.
Mm. And
So,
having said that too, like, I'm happy for people to question what I say as well. Please do. And
yeah.
I don't think that I know everything. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I think people often say, look, why are you attacking? Why are you criticizing? What gives you the right to do so? You might be wrong, Peter. Many Adventists would disagree. What gives me the right to say this is that at an early age, for many years, I was told on a weekly basis that the time of trouble was coming, that if I didn't keep the Sabbath, I wouldn't go to heaven. If I didn't acquiesce to the Sunday law, I'd be thrown in jail. My parents and family would be divided, and this was scary stuff to be told to a young kid. So what gives me the right to push back on it is that I lived through it, and many Adventists would disagree with me, but many would agree. Thousands went through early childhood spiritual abuse from the Adventist church. Thousands. Many would disagree. Great. I'm glad you didn't have that. But for me, every week, time of trouble, Sunday law, running to the hills, family could be divided, thrown in jail for a 7-year-old right through puberty. This is what I was told. And thousands agree with me that this happened. It did happen. It does happen. Great if it doesn't for you. It did happen for me. And that gives me a right to push back on that spiritual abuse.
I
There's
was
my 2 cents.
terrified. I was terrified when I was a kid that I'd committed the unpardonable sin, not even really knowing what it was, just that it was something quite nefarious, that I knew the
Right.
truth, but I didn't. But for some reason, I rejected the truth.
Yeah.
And
And
that's what keeps you in as well. That's what keeps you silent, because you fear that, hang on a minute, if I speak up about something that's concerning me, what effect does that have on my salvation, but also the salvation of other people? So, and I think that's one of the biggest things too, is that whole, you can't speak up in case you're a stumbling block to someone else. But in many ways, that just forms a little ecosystem that is very unhealthy. And in the end, how can that be ethical when your system is based on having faith and belief, when there's no transparency and there's no ability to question,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
everything is suppressed?
Yeah.
And that's almost
How invalidating of anyone who has been through trauma based on Adventist teaching, not isolated trauma, thousands do agree, and how defamatory to just say, "Oh, well, that's not my experience, so therefore maybe you're just making it up." That's just ridiculous.
yeah, made up.
Just want a quick plug. We're talking about 2 articles today with Debbie Hooper that she's written for Adventist Today. Go to adventisttoday.org, easy to find, and read the first one, I Will Go Ride. Great article, Debbie. So I encourage people to go and check that out. And the second article we're going to bring up in a moment, but I just want to quickly round off that first part, and then we're going to have a break. Motor Sapien asks, Peter, as someone who has read the Great Controversy 6 times, I'm just starting my 6th time, Motor Sapien, would you say that Ellen G. White's position is that Jesus paid the price of sin that justice demands to appease the wrath of God? That is not her position. He paid a price that began a process for humans to emulate that ability to pay the price of sin by keeping the commandments and to vindicate God. So if Christ had appeased the wrath of God at the cross, which is what the Bible teaches, then there'd be no need for Adventism. The Great Controversy says the wrath of God has not been appeased, but it will be in the time of trouble when a select few can stand without a mediator and not sin and keep the commandments. Now, they're already sealed. They've been through the are they righteous path. They've already been chosen as the 144,000. Not saying that's a specific term, a number. It could be a metaphorical number. But that's what Ellen White teaches in the Great Controversy, without doubt. So it's not in the Bible. And the one... where's it gone? Sorry. Oh, this is a good way to segue again into Conrad Vine. Is very close to losing his credentials, methinks. So we'll come to that. We're going to have a short break, Debbie, and we will come back and we are going to start talking about Divided We Stand. Traditionals rise against church leadership. So enjoy your break, everyone. We will be back very soon.
You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again. love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
Hello and welcome back. I'm with Debbie Hooper. She is a writer, and today's talk is Today's Adventism, What Current Events Tell Us About the SDA Church. And we've just spent the last hour talking about one of two articles that we're discussing today. I Will Go Ride was the topic, and that was Aussie riders distribute the great controversy on a 700-mile ride. I guess you used the word mile there for our American readers. And Debbie, as I said, is a writer, and she's also written for Sydney Morning Herald. AT, the topics of today are in the Adventist Today magazine. And you can go and find both these articles at adventisttoday.org. Great publication. Go and check it out. Now, I'll bring onto the screen the article we're looking at now. Probably the biggest controversy going on within the Adventist Church right now is this one surrounding Conrad Vine. And I've reached out via a couple of channels to get him on the show. So watch this space. It may happen. So I'm just bringing this up. Bear with me. And hi, welcome back, everybody. Good to have you here. Don't forget, tomorrow I am interviewing Steve Daly, and the day after our SDA church program is with Clinton Baldwin. Okay. And Rochelle Anonymous has just written, just bring up a couple of posts that have come through during the break. I'm late because I'm in the US and have been watching the presidential debate. Hope everyone's having a good night. Yes, this show has concurrently been going along with the debate. Is it still going? And Moto Sapien says that, Peter, what I've read, disagree with you. I love that, Moto Sapien. That is the whole point, isn't it? You and I are friends. We've got to know each other through this show. I love that we disagree. Would you suggest, though, that I'm correct in my assessment that reading The Great Controversy can give you some sleepless nights if you take on board some of the time of trouble, some of the Catholic Sunday laws? Would you agree with me on that one, though? And let's see, Ray's watching. Just seeing if there's anything else here to bring up. Yeah, Sir Nilo writes, the Great Controversy demotes Jesus and promotes Satan to equality. Only the 144,000 can tip the scales. Yeah. Motor Sapien, did you get that when you read the Great How many times have you read it? We're going to be like, how many generation Adventist are you, and how many times have you read The Great Controversy? Adventist Analyzer writes, I was just working on the outline of how Adventism reflects the wokeism of our current world trend. I hope that's what you were talking about tonight. Well, I mean, Conrad has said himself, go woke, go broke. And Debbie has written an article about this whole topic, so we may well touch on that. MC, good to see you here. And never be the same. MC played music with me when I was in LA, California, Loma Linda. And thank you, MC, for watching today. Fantastic musician. And Motor Sapien says, I so hope you can get Conrad. Me too. And Rochelle is here. The debate is over. What was it like, Rochelle? It's interesting, Debbie. I noticed during the break, all of a sudden our viewership doubled. And I'm thinking a lot of people were at the that's some people specifically said, can you do the Conrad Vine part of the interview after the debate in the second half? I didn't plan it that way, but yeah. How was the debate? Who won, Rochelle? Who won the debate? Okay, so over to you, Debbie. Tell us about your article, Divided We Stand, Traditionalists Rise Against Church Leadership. And perhaps a good way to start, I know that you've kind of got a PowerPoint to go with this. I'll bring that up on the screen, but I just wanted to promote the site, the Adventist Today there. But to start with, and as I said, you've probably got your own flow here. I won't interrupt this time. But can you tell people who don't know about Conrad Vine, who is he? What's the ruckus? What's going on? Why did you write the article? Over to you.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. First, before I do that, I'd really like just to say that I'm not about attacking Conrad Vine. I actually think he's a man of conviction. So I actually have a lot of respect for him, even although some of the things that have been said since by his supporters are things that I can't resonate with. That's not what this article is about. This is simply doing a little bit of a dive into looking at what's happening currently in our church politically. And what I see there, as you can see on that first slide, is that there is a deepening divide within traditional Adventism. The people that you see on the screen there, Conrad, Ted Wilson, and Stephen Bohr, I would class as traditionalists. I know that that's probably not a perfect category, but that's my reason for that is that there is an element that they seek that is a return to more traditional ways of looking at things. So even although there are schisms within traditionalism as well, that's just what I'm trying to do to use to make it easier for us to understand. So Conrad Vine, who is he? He recently actually did a sermon called Remnant, Respectable, or Regime Church, Broken Bride, Part 2. That was on my son's birthday, the 17th of August, at Main Camp meeting. And that has put the cat among the pigeons, so to speak, and there's been a huge reverberations around the Adventist world, I would say. So who is he? He is president of Adventist Frontier Missions. He has served as a pastor in the UK and Minnesota, USA. He's a church administrator. He was, in the Middle East Union. He spent many years with ADRA in Central Asia and other regions worldwide. So this is a man with a lot of perspective, a lot of experience interacting within church systems, and being affected by policy, and also by, but also deeply believes the theology of the Adventist Church. He's been increasingly public about his criticism of the Adventist handling of COVID-19, and that's probably where the story starts. Let's see if I can go on to the next one. That's what his message was about the other day on August 17, about the reaffirmation statement that was made by the Adventist Church in response to whether the vaccine was a matter of religious liberty or not. This actually comes from the statement, or a statement that was made. As you can see here, just to give you background, the church made a statement that to avoid confusion about the church's own positions, it will often be let's start at the beginning. So we recognize that at times our members will have personal concerns and even conscientious convictions that go beyond the teachings and positions of the church. In these cases, the church's religious liberty leaders will do what they can to provide support and counsel on a personal basis, not as a church position, even at times assisting members in writing their own personal accommodation requests to employers and others. To avoid confusion, however, about the church's own position, it will often be the case that in such circumstances the church will not wish its support or advocacy for the member to be reflected in public correspondence or communications. It is important that the church preserve its ability to speak to issues that are central to its system of beliefs and identity, and that its influence not be diluted by pursuing personal convictions and agendas that are not central to its gospel and prophetic concerns. The Seventh-day Adventist Church, in consultation with the health ministries and public affairs and religious liberty departments of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, is convinced that the vaccination programs that are generally being carried out are important for the safety and health of our members and the larger community. Therefore, claims of religious liberty are not used appropriately in objecting to government mandates or employer programs designed to protect the health and safety of their communities. Now, I don't know whether you understand the significance of that or not, but if you keep in mind that the Seventh-day Adventist Church has schools and hospitals and many places of employment, this particular reaffirmation statement had a massive effect on how
Huge.
those schools and places of employment were the policies that were carried out there. In my own case, we had working at a school in Queensland. We were told that we were not welcome to. Well, let me put it this way. I probably shouldn't say it like that, but that we would need the vaccination. I did. I come from a family that is very health-minded. I've got a mother and two sisters out of the three of us who are nurses, and we believe in science, and we were all for the vaccination. So I had no trouble with that. So that's my personal position, but that doesn't mean that I don't see what Conrad Vine and other members of the Adventist Church are saying here. They were not going to be supported by the Adventist Church if they wanted to say to their employer, that does not seem right. That is not according to the convictions of my conscience. That goes against my religious liberties. So Vine's assertion in that sermon on August 17 is that the church was deceived and it became a willing participant in deceiving its members. And there are reasons for that have been revealed since. I know that some of this is going to be controversial to people, and I'm not saying what is right or what is wrong. I'm simply reporting a summary of what he said. This isn't his words. This is a summary of what he was saying. So he was saying that there was a perpetuation of lies about the virus. The church stifled alternative therapeutic options. They supported false claims about immunity and safety. In this case, the AstraZeneca vaccination has been proven to have been dangerous and caused things like strokes and brain bleeds. And it is currently being, there's a current, I believe, what do you call it? Like a mass claim, legal claim.
Oh, yes, yeah.
The term.
Forgotten.
Yeah, and the effectiveness of the vaccines, for instance, there was general communication about the fact that if you had a vaccine, then you would be safe from the virus and you wouldn't be able to pass it on, but that proved inaccurate. Furthermore, there was social, professional, and financial cancellation. That's actually a term that the left has commonly used, but is now adopted by the right as well. Cancellation of people who spoke up against the official narrative. And there was a case of suppression at the General Conference session. I think that was in 2023, when they wanted to raise the issue, raise the topic. And it was, first of all, they attempted to make it, to ride over the top of it through the systems that were in place for putting forward a new topic onto the agenda. But then when certain people were successful at doing that, Ted Wilson spoke up and said that he would like people to vote against having it as part of
the
it.
agenda. Sorry to jump in, but I
I
watched that the other day because I'd heard about it, and that was an incredible piece of the committee chairperson trying to shut down the topic and people refusing to allow it to be shut down. It was obviously a manipulation of the process. And I'm not an Adventist, but if I was, I'd be ashamed of how they behaved, and it's all there on YouTube. What would they to watch that? What do people need to link? Just the I could share it if I could find it. Well, perhaps we'll share it in the notes later.
Yeah, I watched it through a different video commentary by the name of who was it? I can't think of his name.
Yeah, I know who you mean. He's been sort of doing lots of videos on it.
Yeah, this one, David Barron.
That's right, yeah.
So, yeah, I watched it through that. I haven't actually watched the original.
And
So,
I only interrupt
yeah.
there to encourage people to go and see it if you want to see committee meeting manipulation in real time. Incredible.
Yeah, and I don't think that anyone, even if they're being very fair-minded, no matter which side of the political divide
Exactly.
they would recognise that that was suppression at its
Exactly. Yeah.
finest.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you've raised that because I'm not saying I agree or disagree with what should have been brought onto the agenda. I'm just saying that watch that
Yeah.
video and you will see an example of Adventist committee in process trying to shut it down with lies. They're lying when they try and shut the people down. We've moved on to a new question now,
Mm.
purposely knowing there were delays in the Zoom responses.
Yeah, it felt very manipulated to
Yes,
me.
yeah. And then
That
Ted hops up and says, I implore you to vote against it. And
yes,
they did in the end, didn't they? It
they
didn't
did.
come on. Yeah.
They
Wasn't even
voted
on the
against
agenda.
it. Yeah,
Boy,
yeah.
that's global kingly rule that Ellen warned about.
Well, that's it. That's what they're saying. So, what's the result of all of this is that certain members are feeling very betrayed, disillusioned and angry. Conrad Vine says in minute 38, nobody seems to care, which is kind of a tough conclusion to come to, if you ask me. I think many of us have felt that way. But when you see the systems of it at play, when you actually dig in and you can see it happening in real time, it's pretty heartbreaking. Yeah. Anyway, so apparently the Adventist Church, is responsible for setting up the International Religious Liberty Association over 130 years ago. So, in religious liberty and liberty of conscience was something that they recognised that long ago to be something that would characterise the final crisis, the final days. So, these are the things that Conrad Vine very, very carefully showed when he looked at the statements made by the IRLA and by various leaders at that time, and also by Ellen White, that this is a significant issue. And yet many of the statements, the words used throughout the recent health crisis contradicted some of the things that were actually set up that long ago and that were deeply believed in by Adventism. So he felt that there were implications. And I think this is really a solemn thing. And I'm saying it this way because I do have a lot of, although, I believe in vaccines very much, I do have a lot of sympathy for how these people feel. So the implications for faithful Adventists in the final crisis, when people are called to repent and believers are told to come out of Babylon, corrupt and false religious systems. This is how he's starting to see the leadership of the General Conference of the Adventist Church. He's concerned about the direction of the church. I hope that I'm representing what he says because I've watched those videos so many times and tried to make sure that I am doing that. So anyway, I'm sure there are things I've missed. Vine says that the pandemic merely revealed and exposed where each of our hearts are. He calls for every General Conference administrator who is party to that reaffirmation statement to resign immediately because they overstep their authority with catastrophic impact on the lives of innocent Adventists worldwide. they no longer have our confidence. Now, I can hear already in my own head that the counter argument to that. But what about, the vaccine saving so many people's lives? That's not really what they're talking about.
No,
That
exactly.
he's talking about here. What he's talking about here is that there were families divided by this issue, and the church was not willing to say this is a matter of conscience and this is a matter of religious liberty. They weren't willing to say to employers, maybe you should consider what do you call it, where you give them an exemption for these particular employees.
Yeah.
When they themselves had said they believe in religious liberty and matters of conscience. And everything that they've said in the past was building confidence that the church would back them in these situations. So, yeah, that's Conrad Vine's sermon, whether you believe in vaccinations or not, had some very important things to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're highlighting that, that it's about this process, not about the actual content of the topic. It's about the freedom of speech. And Ted Wilson made it clear that the membership can choose for themselves. This is more about those who are employed by the church. There was no backup to them, like you were trying to find the word too. I'm trying to find it.
Exemptions.
No exemptions written up.
And they weren't willing to represent other people to other employers either. That's the impression I got. So even if you weren't working for the church, they weren't willing to publicly put their names to, we believe this is a religious liberty situation, and that could you make this person exempt, or for any reason. And there was a situation where Conrad Vine speaks of a young man who ended up having a stroke, and his life has been incredibly impacted.
Australian guy, wasn't it?
Yeah. I'm still trying to find out more about that situation, because I'd be very interested in knowing whether, I don't doubt Conrad Vine. He seems like a very, very upstanding person. But what is his, is this, how associated is his stroke with the AstraZeneca, which is known now for causing strokes and brain bleeds? So it seems to me, there could be something there.
Interesting to find out who the Aussie guy was, and to try and chat with him and
I'm trying to find that out, actually.
Yeah, that'd make a good follow-up interview.
Oh, it'd be a great interview, but I don't know whether they're willing to come out and speak about it publicly. I think that's probably been why it hasn't come out yet. So anyway, Conrad Vine, and so this is where the whole two sides of Adventism comes under the microscope. So Conrad Vine is kind of saying, the General Conference, you're not being true to our message. You're a cultural Marxist. You are cultural Marxists. You're willing to morph into whatever the changing society wants from you. You're not standing up for the things the church has always stood up for. And he predicts a split. So he's saying they're very leftist, which most of people who are progressive would say, no, what? And we were probably grateful that the church came out and said, no, we want you to have the vaccine, and to be very upfront about that. So I think I'm muddying the waters now. Sorry.
No, it's good.
But Conrad's saying, okay, we've got the faithful convicted Adventists on this side. We've got the cultural Marxists on that side. I really hate the term cultural Marxist, but That's what they're saying I am, okay. So the faithful convicted Adventists, they face a loss so that they can live according to the truth. Strong believers. Cultural Marxists morph and are at ease with changing society. They're wanting to progress the Adventism to be more relevant to a changing society. Well, convicted Adventists are willing to direct tithes and offerings to conferences and ministries that stay faithful to Scripture.
That's kind of the big thing there that the GC, the General Conference, are upset about.
Yeah, that
Because it's
hit
hitting the
a
money,
nerve.
the nerve.
Hit a massive nerve. That
Yeah.
whereas
Can we come to that? I just want to raise something because you may have found this out. Rose Power has just made a comment. In Australia, the government had said that they would fine any business that failed to endorse the vax. Was that happening in the States as well?
I haven't been able to work that out, Peter, because I did do some searching about whether the government did pay or there was some financial benefit to the church taking this particular stance.
Yeah.
I'm assuming there was, but I don't think there was a direct.
Not the same as here.
Yeah, I could be wrong. And, like once you start chasing a rabbit down a rabbit hole, it's hard to, you don't, I must admit that I didn't follow that particular thing enough, but that's interesting what you say. And there has been suggestion that the church received money from the government for this, but I could not find evidence of that, is all I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway, but if we think about it, like the church does accept government handouts. Does that mean that they are more swayed by societal thinking on modern issues or not? So Vine is saying the whole go woke, go broke thing is about, well, maybe we won't keep paying our tithes if this continues.
Yes. And he's not calling for Adventists to leave the church. He's just saying stay in the church, but choose where you are going to pay your tithes and offerings. And that, like you say, that's what has hit the nerve, because he has a huge influence amongst the more, as we're saying, traditionalists, for want of a better word, Adventists, the historicist, the traditional Adventists, the heritage Adventists. He has a huge influence there. And from what I'm fielding behind the scenes from that particular demographic, I wouldn't be surprised if they listen to what he says and follow through with it. And that's why Mark Finlay, Vice President of the General Conference, did a recent video on this topic, and in a very nuanced way tried to put Conrad in his place. Sorry to interrupt, but I think that we just got to highlight what the real core.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you. I hadn't actually come across that yet, but I'm not surprised, because you can see the where it's all leading, and you can see that as it's going along too, it's getting muddied by other people having their say about it all.
Yes, speculating.
Definitely. So, whereas I think what Conrad said was a lot more nuanced, I think it's getting a lot less nuanced.
Yeah.
As time goes on. So
Mark Anthony, one of my favourite heritage Adventists that watches the show, says the reaction was swift because too much money is at stake.
Yes.
Very good point.
So true. But as you can see here, like this is a slide from his presentation. He said options for Bible faithful Adventists today: 1, do nothing. Actively pray for our leaders to uphold liberty of conscience and contend for the faith that has been passed to us. If the GC supports future mandates over the consciences of members, and so that can be in a number of areas, that can be that like I've heard people talk about climate change, I've heard them talk about LGBT inclusions, I've heard them talking about abortion. There's so many different things. I guess you could include women's ordination. But if the GC supports future mandates from the government over the consciences of members, establish a parachurch movement within Adventism. So
Yeah.
he's not even saying leave, he's saying establish this within Adventism. And that's where the whole tithe thing comes in, I
Yeah.
think.
And by para, is he meaning underground
I would
movement?
imagine it's a no, not yet.
Right.
I think that would be the next.
Not officially.
I think it's like a parallel church movement. That's what it
Yeah.
means. So it would be, and this is all speculation on my behalf because I haven't had a conversation with him, which I would love to do. But I think what it means is that they then would choose where their tithes and offerings go. And I've had a conversation with somebody else who explained how that could happen. Because when you're donating online your tithes, you choose which church you're donating from. So if, for instance, your church belongs in a conference that is woke, let's just say, more progressive, then you would choose a church in a conference that you are willing to support.
Yes.
So,
I
so
see what you're saying.
so you could choose a church in Africa that's going to, for instance, support it.
Yes. Okay. So not even, he's not suggesting give that tithe and offering to an independent. He's just saying choose a direct church. But is the Adventist church even set up to do that? Don't people have to pay it into their local church and it's then distributed?
I think
And
you
so
can do it online.
if you decided to go, well, I'm going to support this particular church in Africa that's aligned with my feelings, once they get that tithe and offering, aren't they then required to send that back to the GC to then send down where it says it should go? Like if an they'd have to write it as a donation, not a tithe. Anyway, we're talking.
Good question. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know that extent. I just, and once again, I'm reporting on what somebody else has said, so I haven't verified that, to be honest. So I don't know. And perhaps it even means, I know that other traditionalists have actually called for people to hand their tithes to independent ministries, not to withhold it from the actual church.
Right.
So yeah, and a lot of that is happening now. Tithe paying to the church has plummeted.
Yeah.
And especially, and this is the other interesting thing about go woke, go broke, is that a lot of progressives aren't paying tithe at all. So
No, that's the funny thing there.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then the next step would be to, if the GC supports future mandates from the government, migrate to underground house church movements led by vocational elders and pastors.
Yeah, so that's where people are worried, because while he's saying keep it in the church, a lot of the underground church kind of concepts get to use the money how they want. It's a better step than like the I don't want to reveal names, but I spoke to someone who was in the high level church, very concerned that the monies that would normally go to them are going to all the independent ministries, millions of dollars. So we're not just talking about the odd 20,000 here and there. So they're very concerned. But what interests me is why doesn't Ted Wilson and Mark Findlay come down on the 3ABN and the independents they help promote them?
Yeah,
they're independent ministries. This guy's saying keep the money inside the church.
Yeah.
And they're coming down like a ton of bricks on him. Kay Judge writes that Conrad Vine has been banned from preaching in SDA churches in Michigan state.
I think Rick was saying, just based on that whole parachurch thing, I think he's saying basically what I said, that it's diverting tithes to conferences that stand on biblical principles.
Right.
And if that doesn't work, underground house churches, which is kind of what we're saying.
Right.
And he's saying you can tithe through Adventist giving anywhere in the world. So that is
good to know. Yeah, okay. Yeah, there we go, Rick. Thanks for that. And so that's kind of what he's suggesting. And then if that doesn't work, go the underground.
Yeah,
church.
that's kind of how
but even at least the underground churches are probably going to put money into their local church.
Yeah.
So isn't that interesting? I hadn't pondered that before, that the Ted Wilson is all over 3ABN and Jeff Batchelor and the church administrators fawn over the independents that are taking their money. Here's a guy saying, look, I don't want to divert it out of the church to independents. I want to keep it in the Adventist church, but to churches I feel aligned with, they're all, whoa,
Yeah.
up in arms about
It
it.
is
Why is
interesting,
that?
isn't it? But I wonder whether there is some agreement. Like other speculators have said, someone like Stephen Ball, for instance, could be receiving an amount of money from the church every year. Well, maybe there's a quid pro quo thing going on there. Who knows? So you don't follow the money, but I haven't.
Yeah, well, that can be our part 2 in a few weeks.
Oh, money, numbers, no. All right. So do you want me to keep going?
Keep going.
All right. Sorry, I don't want to do a lecture, but it's so complicated trying to get my head around it all and break it down to make it
We're
make sense.
starting the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
It's great.
All right. So traditionalists now, this is out there on the web. They're saying all kinds of things. I've looked at two main ones. So they're calling for repentance and or rejection. This is echoing Vine's call for those in the conference who failed to hold fast to health principles to resign. This person called David Barron, is also saying that the church was deceived by drug sorcery, pharmakia, he says, and equates it to medical Babylon, who deceives others to take poison into their bodies. And he references Revelation 18. That might not be the exact reference there. By their sorceries were all nations deceived. Another commentator by the name of Mark Lastimoso says, expose it, the General Conference, as dark. And generally in the stratosphere of all of the goings on the internet, some are interpreting this as the loud cry of Revelation 18, 1-4, where God's people are called to come out of Babylon. I think this is pretty serious.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. This is interesting to watch because it's reminiscent of the Des Ford Glacier View era, where the administration, the establishment used their power to suppress Des, who is polar opposite theologically to Conrad Vine, generally speaking. And now it's happening to Conrad Vine. This is the next Glacier View, but of a conservative, traditional Adventist. They're trying to suppress him. Now, interesting little side fact, in the early 80s, the church did that in Australia with George Burnside, the Heritage Adventist, and Des Ford. The facts went out. Both were not to be invited to speak in Adventist churches. I'm not sure if it was the Sydney Conference or Australia. Yeah, they want to cut off. All they care about is the establishment. They want to keep that going. So but that's again what surprises me. If you care about the establishment,
what is that?
Why support the independent ministries that are taking all the money? I don't get that. There'll be some reason.
And why are you concerned more about an establishment than you are about the message? No, I don't get that. But
yeah.
So I just heard from Brendan, who said that David Barron was trained in a cult offshoot of SDA called Creation SDA. He's one of the most extreme SDAs out there. And I think Mark Lastimoso is probably fairly extreme as well. I'd be really interested in Brendan's thinking on where all of this is heading, because I don't, this is quite new to me, but this is what I've found anyway. So the second thing that they're wanting is reformation. David Barron, once again, is comparing Vine's sermon, and to be honest, David Barron does not seem of the same caliber to me. And no offense, David, but it doesn't seem of the same caliber to me as Dr. Vine. Yeah, very different people. But anyway, so what he's saying, he's comparing Vine's sermon and the YouTube recording to Martin Luther's 95 Theses nailed to the door of Castle Church in Wittenberg in 1517.
Which people compare Des Ford to that as well.
Yeah,
Like people they're getting behind Vine like people got behind Ford. And the establishment won with regard to Des Ford.
Yeah.
I think this time
But
they may not win because the money comes from the Conservatives. The power base is the Conservatives. And look out. I think that this is going to be a different outcome to the Des Ford suppression kangaroo court.
Very, very fascinating. So he's urging people to share links of Vine's sermon, like they shared the theses, copies of the theses around to all of the believers. So Vine is also compared to John Wycliffe, who's another big, I think there should be an E on there, actually, sorry, everybody, of the Reformation, who stayed true to biblical truth despite opposition as described in the Great Controversy by Ellen White. So Wycliffe was a hero to Adventists, has been a hero to Adventists as well. So he's up there.
Yeah.
And,
they're legend building.
yeah, they really are. Myth building, legend building. Not
Myth
saying
building.
he's not a good guy, so don't get me wrong.
No. Well, same with Des.
Yeah, exactly. The third thing, redirect tithes. So they're kind of taking it on from what Vine's message was, and they're urging Adventists to redirect tithes, send direct to the people. God's ways are not to be counterworked by men's ways. And that is a statement by that David Barron quoted apparently by Ellen White in her testimonies. So
these days, if you ask the progressive liberals, the gospel Adventists to redirect their tithes, the Conservatives will go, yeah, so what? It's going to do nothing.
Yeah.
And all the big claims that were made by what's the guy that I really liked him, Jackson, that called Ted Wilson's talk hooey, or a bunch of hooey or something. Even he was like, the NAD funds the GC, we've got a lot of power, but nothing happened because the reality is, the NAD funds the GC, but not by the progressives, by the Conservatives.
Yeah.
Hilarious. I'll just quickly bring up something that Gillian said pertaining to Wycliffe. Slight difference. Luther and Wycliffe preached the gospel of justification by faith. Just saying. Yeah, that's that. Oh yeah. We're not trying to say that one side or the other is preaching the accurate gospel, though I do suggest that Des was. We're talking about this the establishment,
the myth building we're referring to,
the establishment and the kangaroo court that took Des out and is trying to take Conrad out.
Definitely. I understand that a lot of this can be very easily misunderstood. So anyway, maybe some discussion later online. Who knows? So, all right. So Stephen Bohr is most.
So what's going on with him? I haven't followed up this part of it, so I'm very interested in what you have to say about him.
Bring
Tell
him
us.
in. So he cancelled Vine, as we all know, as a speaker at an upcoming Secrets Unsealed summit.
But isn't he a conservative, traditionalist, heritage Adventist himself?
Yes.
So what got his goat? What was he worried about? I would have thought he would have been all over Conrad.
Yes, well, that's what I would have thought too. But it's hard to know exactly. And there's an understanding that there must be some form of agreement between Stephen Bohr and the General Conference.
Right.
But we don't know. So that that's pure speculation.
We're speculating.
Yes. And he said that he didn't so he ended up issuing a second statement after he'd already cancelled him to try and explain himself in what it was that he disagreed with Vine over, and the particular contentious, I think the word was that he used, part of Vine's message and why he'd cancelled him. Well, That did not wash. It didn't hold water with anybody. So as you can see, I don't know if you can read those. The greatest want of the world is the want of men who will not be bought or sold, men who in their inmost souls are true and honest, men who do not fear to call sin by its right name, men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle to the pole, men who will stand for the right. So that's in education. You are no longer one of those, Mr. Ball. Another person, many a star that we have admired for its brilliance will then go out in the darkness. Please, Pastor Ball, don't be one of those stars. I have learnt so much from your teaching. Again, agreed. I used to be a huge supporter of Pastor Ball until I realised his focus is about maintaining the things of this world that he has accumulated rather than the truth. Very sad. That is just a small snapshot of what was posted. Am I still online? Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Sorry, there we
No,
go. I bumped a button.
Okay. I wondered if I'd gone off because I couldn't hear anything. Okay, so, but he did get one good comment, and that comment he pinned to the top of his comments. So that was nice. So previous supporters of his ministry called Bohr to account for cancelling Vine. They're very, very angry with Bohr. The overwhelmingly negative reactions to Bohr's ban of Vine. Some call on Bohr to repent, and others vowed to withdraw financial support from Secrets Unsealed Ministry. The first neutral response, I counted them up, and I could be wrong because I'm not good at numbers, just remember that. That was on the 9th, a couple of days ago, was 77. Like I counted 77 before I got to even one that was mildly neutral.
Wow. And what, could just read again the positive one that he pinned?
Okay, so I don't have it all here, but I'll just read what I've got.
Just part of it, yeah.
I've been told that I'm wrong by a lot of people as of late. I don't know what to tell them. I've watched more than one video of Dr. Vine's sermons concerning the church and its service structures and committees. I easily picked out many inaccuracies and assumptions in what he was sharing. The path he has chosen will not help, blah, blah, blah.
I think a lot of the independents think that they are getting money from the Adventist traditionalists, but that those people are going, well, here's 50 to you, here's 50 to the mainstream. I don't think they realize that so many people, like in this particular, I won't say which independent ministry here in Australia, but I spoke to the person that does all the accounting for them, and they were getting millions a year, millions in Australia, in this one independent ministry. Don't tell me that money is finding its way in any percentage, even split, back into the church as well. So it's a real interesting.
It's such a
it's conflicting to me to hear Bohr, who is taking a lot of money into his ministry, then say that Conrad is.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And to come out and speak publicly, not knowing, like he said, no, it's not about the vaccine. It's not about the vaccine. It's about the, trying to split tithes off and offerings and forming a parachurch and an underground church, etc. So that was really interesting. But somebody here, Chris Lucas, says it's like they completely overlook the fact that the Vatican is promoting the vaccine and Jesuit President Donald Trump is promoting something or other. But no, they didn't overlook the fact that the Vatican was promoting the vaccine. They actually drew comparisons. So anyway. All right. So Vine is cancelled. He's banned from Secrets Unsealed, Stephen Bohr, banned from preaching in Michigan conference. There is a suggested ban in Northern New England conference, but I haven't heard the latest on that. There are potential restrictions across North American division. So the question is, what next? With that growing schism between traditionalists and church leadership, conflict among those who were former allies, Bohr and Vine, and calls to reject the Adventist Church, there is a major shake-up, in my opinion. These are my questions. What will Reformation look like for the Adventist Church? And with this gaining momentum, are progressive Adventists even part of the conversation?
Yeah, what will Reformation look like for the Adventist Church? I think stagnant as it was in 1919, 1818, 1957, 1980, 44 years on from that. So, yeah, what was the other question there that you raised?
Oh, I'll just go back into it. It's telling me, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for watching. This gaining momentum, are progressive Adventists even part of the conversation? I don't think they are. I wonder if they actually are. I don't know. What progressives that are watching, do you feel you have a voice in this? I don't know why, and I'm speculating, but I think
Yeah, you
I
got
think
some.
that the progressives are saying things, perhaps siding with that he probably should have been banned. They definitely don't agree with his theology, that kind of thing. But I don't see an impact that they could have. Whereas the impact that he could have on the more traditional Adventist, resending their tithe to places the GC don't want them to, could have one of the biggest impacts on the Adventist Church
Yeah,
ever.
more than somebody getting up and speaking and
Yeah.
having 95 theses.
Yeah. Yes. And if and I've chatted to Gillian and Des about why didn't they make GNU like a church, a denomination, and they had some very good reasons why they didn't. So this is not a criticism. I think great, Good News Unlimited, fantastic publisher, fantastic resource, no criticism at all. But if they had said, we're moving, GNU is an official offshoot or upshoot, that would have dramatically affected the finances of the SDA church back in the day.
I don't think
It wouldn't now, but it would have then. In 1984,
yeah.
if they'd
And
said,
what
come with
probably
us, leave the
them.
church, join Good News Unlimited, the SDA church could potentially have collapsed. And
From speaking with Gillian about that, she's been very clear that Des Ford was not interested in his own church. So I think that speaks of his integrity.
Yeah. I like I said, when I asked her and she told me, I thought, good reasons not to. I think they did the right thing. I'm just speculating that if they had, the money would have going from the Adventist Church would have had a huge impact. In 1984, the church had 4 million members.
Wow.
Now they claim to have 25 million, and progressives are the minority. They think they're not. They think everything's changing. Woohoo! But yeah,
just going along quite blindly.
I just don't think
but they're not willing to
any
speak
influence.
up. Yeah. No, I don't think they do either. And they're not willing to speak up.
This was an interesting one. Angela Lima points out. So they cancelled Vine, but they let sexual predator Samuel Pipham stick around for a while. And also the guy that plagiarized his doctorate and was the chair, I think, of the whole women's ordination study. I'm pretty sure he's still floating around. They certainly, he impacted that study a lot. Gillian has just... MC has said, excellent questions, Debbie. I think we've really stimulated a good conversation here. We've set the scene. We're not attacking sides. We're just saying, here's what's going on. What do you think? What does everyone think? Replying to this is Gillian. If it takes a squabble among the right-wing traditionalists to get a possible change, I say go, Conrad. I believe he is an honest man, unlike some of the others conspiracy peddlers. Yeah, I agree, Gillian. No Sunday law coming. I agree with you. No Sunday law coming. There is no Sunday law coming, in my humble opinion. This recent upset with Dr. Conrad Vine's statements shows how fractured the Adventist denomination actually is. And when I've looked back, as Gillian knows, on the Glacier View era, and I don't feel that it was divided, but there was a real call for, Adventists to stay Adventists, and they just worked around the side of the establishment. I don't think effectively,
Yes,
but
yes.
not fractured. Whereas
Mm.
now I think, look, what happens next is going to be amazing. And perhaps we'll finish on this question for you. Conrad Vine, I'm sure he's now kind of sitting at home watching all of this. My understanding is that he's a bit cautious about getting out there too much in the public arena, sharing his views. If he doesn't speak up now and it just fades out, that's an option. Does he vamp up? Do people around him ramp it up? Because Adventists don't achieve anything unless they're ramped up around a person. So I'll just read Brendan and then we'll have your closing thoughts. Kay Judge puts, excellent observation, Gillian. And Kay, I'd love you on the show because I often get confused. You sound like you really don't like the great controversy, and I now know that you're fifth generation, that you're firmly entrenched in the church and love it, and you see all the good things about it. That's great. And I think that's awesome that you do that. Really good. But I would love to hear what your critique is of the great controversy, if you have one. And Brendan writes, I think there is a cautionary tale with the Worldwide Church of God. That's true. Which had a massive split and lost 60% of their people, largely conservatives to offshoots. Yeah, and they have not recovered, that particular denomination. I had friends that were involved when it split. Brendan says Conrad will be speaking at the Religious Liberty Conference at Village SDA Church next weekend. I'm not sure if someone brought that up. And Kay Judge has put, you draw interesting conclusions, Peter. and I know you don't agree with my conclusions, but I reckon I'm not barking up the wrong tree. Maybe I'm observing some branches that don't need to be looked at, but I think there's something to see here. I think there's something going on. Okay, well, unless you can see any comments there you'd like to reply to. Oh, Rose has asked you something. Are there too many chiefs that want to be paid? It's definitely a hierarchy where they're looking out for each other, that's for sure. It's administration heavy. Conrad is probably scared to go to the grocery store. Oh dear. Adventism is a religion. As a religion, looks like Christianity, but it is not. Look, what a great conversation. Sorry, one more from Gillian. If Gillian writes, I usually try and bring it onto the screen. That's a bit of a rebellion if Conrad is preaching at the village church. He's banned in Michigan.
His village church in Michigan.
I don't know.
Must be. Actually, that does ring a bell.
And I probably won't say, but there's people watching right now that have put me in touch with Conrad and have asked on my behalf, but also someone has given me his direct mobile number, and Conrad has said I'm allowed to contact him. So I'm going to send him a message literally 5 minutes after the program, and I'm going to try and get him on as soon as possible. Okay, so handing it up to you on our two conversations. We've talked about Divided We Stand, the whole Conrad thing. We've talked about I Will Go and Ride and send out all these. Give us a quick summation.
I feel like I've
summarized it already. Everyone, just go back and watch.
I feel like I've just ridden, I don't know, 711 miles today.
Yeah. Gillian says Des and Conrad would get on fine because they have the same type of integrity.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, so I guess my final thoughts are that when I first saw all of this, I thought, wow, and the last question really encapsulates that, where are the progressives in all of this? You know, the traditionalists were ready to mobilize. It just looked like this, oh my goodness, suddenly everybody was ready to move. But then I realized that no, many of the same suppression tactics are being used on Conrad Vine that have always been used on the progressives. So maybe the progressives are like the naughty puppy that's been smacked too many times. Whereas that hasn't always happened with traditionalists. However, I guess finally what it reveals to me is that the mechanisms of cancellation and control are still very much at hand for the General Conference and for the church, and they're trying their hardest to cancel this guy. He's probably looking at job termination. He's definitely looking at censorship, getting speaker disinvitations everywhere. He's probably being stonewalled. That if he were to reach out, he probably is not going to get a response. Suddenly he's persona non grata.
He's not even going to get a Glacier View conference.
Probably not. So yeah, the church has very, very institutionalized methods of control. It will be really interesting to see, and it's not my job to say who should do what, but I'm just an observer, and I'm really interested but also see that there are people behind the stories whose lives are impacted. So yeah, that's all.
Thank you very much. Debbie Hooper has been my guest today. Shoot up the love hearts and the likes. And if you've got a couple of dollars to spare, please go over to paypal.me/Peter Dixon Music and just throw a couple of dollars my way. I'm doing 3 shows a week now. Tomorrow we've got Steve Daly. And then the next day, SDA&A Church. I'm trying to do a positive thing within this community, not just the robust conversations. Every week on our Friday, 11:30 and 6:30 p.m. Pacific time in the States, SDA&A Church, a gospel message minus the filter of Adventism, straight to the Bible. And you'll find it's less confusing than you thought. So Clinton Baldwin is my guest this week. So yeah, thank you for your support financially, everyone. It really helps, particularly now that I'm doing 3 programs a week. My wife's like, what on earth are you doing? Surely you can be doing something more constructive with your time. I hope she's not watching right now. Yeah. Thank you very much, Debbie. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks,
and we'll love to get you back and talk about this maybe in a month's time and just see what developments have been made.
More homework.
Or homework for you. See you later. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.